clouded out the direct point that this is the exemption. And long-term sustainable water supply finding was edited for brevity and to ensure the evidence is up to date. And then also the variance special circumstances finding was clarified. The errata memo also included some corrections to the language to condition number 30, so the requirements are set in relation to the current project design. Staff also found procedural steps could be clarified. And so with that, the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission is to find the project is covered by common sense exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines 150161B3 because it meets most requirements of the residential infill exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15195. Approve this VTM to subdivide a 4-acre lot into 16 new lots for future residential development, a parcel for road and utilities, a right-of-way dedication to county for Baranda Road, a parcel for stormwater detention basin, and a remainder lot that retains the existing single-family dwelling and accessory structures. And part of this action is to require demolition of the unpermitted accessory structures prior to final map to close the code enforcement case. Staff also recommends that the Planning Commission approve the variance to reduce the agricultural buffer from 200 to 139 feet on the northwest and 78 feet on the southwest. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that well-detailed presentation. With that, I bring it back to the commission. See if the commission has any questions, clarifications, comments. Commissioner Roberts.
Thank you. I want to start with the variance and try to understand that a little bit better. If you could bring up back the map that it's like a Google map that shows the existing developments, and if it also happens to have the project on it, that would be great, because I'm trying to see what is actually in the 200 feet that we're looking at. Is it just lot 1 and the existing development, and are the developments above and below all in that 200-foot setback?
Through the chair, this is the Google Earth photo that we have for this location. I'm sorry, it doesn't show the proposed on it, but it does have the existing house and driveway. So if I may move, so no development above or below this project on Baranda Road has an existing easement in place for agriculture, and we are only proposing on-site agricultural buffer. So I can move forward through this to show the buffer area. Okay, so it's shown here. I'm going to click one more time to emphasize the distances. So from the parcel line of the agricultural fields, they're proposing a distance of 139 maximum and 73 minimum feet. And that would put into easement most of parcel 2, the drainage parcel, on the northwest of this subdivision. And it would put into easement basically the setback area of the existing remainder lot where the housing is. So there would be no structural development in those easement areas. We have yet to receive a plat, which is, when they map out the actual polygon. It's really the purview of their surveyor to decide if they're going to make it one big polygon and follow the recommendation that's in our errata memo that says, roadways and improvements are allowed that have to do with the cul-de-sac, or they might come back with 2 smaller polygons. We'll review that when that comes in, and also review it with Ag Advisory.
To follow up and clarify, so lot 1, which is going to be a proposed house or home or something, is not in the 200-foot setback? It's lot 17. So there was an update to the VTM, and we're now seeing the current version, and that's lot 17, or otherwise known as the remainder lot. The house would be in the 200-foot distance if it were taken to full
recommended distance in Title 21. This is a recommended reduced distance to keep that house out of it.
Through the chair to clarify, Commissioner Roberts, yes, future construction on Lot 1 would be within 200 feet, or could be within 200 feet of the adjacent agricultural property. And as Ms. Israel stated, the existing residents on the remainder lot, or Lot 17, would also continue to be within 200 feet of that adjacent farmland property.
One more follow-up on that then. Basically looking at this map, Lot 17, Lot 1, and Parcel 2 are within the 200-foot setback. Everything else is out of the 200-foot setback.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners?
Kind of related to that, I'm looking at the housing right next door to this development. Is that housing all within the 200-foot setback? It appears to me like some of it is. And has that just been the nature of development before we adopted a 200-foot buffer in that area?
Through the chair, yes, I believe so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Question 1, can you refresh my memory about whether there is a Baranda community plan?
There is no Baranda community plan in place at this time.
So
There was
discussions of the general plan relate to the intention of a community plan and have no further direction to offer us specifically for that area? In other words, they bear on intention, but not on zoning, rules, regulations, processing, infrastructure, the things that would be contained in the community plan, right?
Yes, that's staff's interpretation.
Okay. So setting aside community plan considerations, because we don't have one, I'm puzzled. I want to be really clear at the beginning that I understand we need housing. I understand the desire to expedite projects that contain housing. I understand that this area is intended for development at a more dense level that would be appropriate to a community plan when such a thing is in place. What I don't understand is how we end up with something called a common sense exemption that I can't figure out what the 4 or 5 pages of reasoning allow us to exempt it from CEQA. We would certainly have ways to do that if we had a community plan that talked about how we're going to take this kind of approach to development. But why the heck didn't we just do an initial study? It appears to me this project would have been very clearly covered under an initial study, which appears to me that this 5 pages went to all the trouble to try to duplicate. But right now we're saying that this allows an exemption to CEQA that, to my mind, has not been used before, certainly not in a situation like this. And so I guess I'm really puzzled and kind of frustrated that a project that appears to me to be eminently appropriate is offered under a interpretation that seems new and potentially precedent-setting. I mean, I don't get it. So maybe you could elaborate on that and help me understand it.
Certainly, through the chair. Staff did anticipate that question and prepared an extra slide. So one moment while I pull up this extra slide. All right, so as shown on the slide right now, staff went through the
Let me stop right there. I understand the fact that you have duplicated the things you would do under an initial study. My question is, why didn't you do one? Just get it over with, Why are we looking at exempting something from CEQA in a way that we don't usually do based on having duplicated the findings that would be necessary under an initial study? Not that what were those findings?
All right, well, staff is constantly responding to state initiatives to streamline housing. And so we've been looking whenever possible at the statutory exemptions to move housing forward in an economical and swift manner. So when this project came in for review, we were looking at it through residential infill exemption, which is a statutory exemption, and found that it meets all of the bullets that you see here for that exemption. The site has met, and it doesn't have any of the triggers that would mean that it would not meet that, except for community level planning document prepared in the last 5 years. So the decision in discussion with our director was, are we going to levy this requirement to fall back from a residential infill exemption to go all the way back to doing CEQA on this because county hasn't done a Baranda community plan yet? And where we've landed was there is common sense exemption that could be what we rely on because this residential infill exemption is 90% met.
Through the chair. Okay, so basically that says to me that nowhere in the county is the community plan going to be important. We're going to go ahead and just look at things independently without the benefit of the overall planning process in areas that have been designated as community areas but which don't yet have a plan. The community plan is no longer relevant because we are going to set a new precedent to streamline housing based on this common sense exemption that's being applied here because mostly it fulfills the requirements that we would have had if we wanted to go through CEQA. Is that correct?
So if I may, it's not the intent of staff to throw out and set precedent that in no area and under no circumstances is a community plan appropriate. In this case, and in particular in the Baranda area, that area is fairly well developed. We do have a 1987, though significantly outdated, we do have a 1987 Baranda neighborhood plan that does apply to this area. And so again, staff's intention was to look at based on conditions of this particular parcel in the Baranda area and the intent of state statute and kind of the overall intent of CEQA to apply a common sense exemption here. So we do understand if that is not an approach that the Planning Commission may be comfortable with. But the intention was, no, not to assume that this common sense exemption would apply in every other community plan area in which the county has not done a community plan. Baranda is also unique in that it's adjacent to the city of Salinas. It's in a fairly well-developed area. So there are other considerations for staff to come to under this circumstance, the common sense exemption, which we would not assume would apply necessarily in other community plan areas, absent plans.
Through the chair. Thank you. I appreciate that. But it didn't appear, and I could have missed it, that we have written our findings in such a manner to clarify that this is expressly due to the particular circumstances of this particular case, rather than a statement that anybody who's doing a project that's pretty much what we expected in any community area designate could do it. So I think it was Sandra Day O'Connor. I mean, I think I would be more comfortable if I were absolutely convinced that this was being done based on the specifics of this particular project in this particular place in a way that made it clear that it doesn't apply generally, because otherwise it is flat out making a new statement about how we're going to process things that are in community areas. And while this project seems to me, barring new information, to be perfectly reasonable and within the intent, the process has me really worried. And So I'm looking for ways from staff to say, maybe the applicant has ways, how can we clarify that we're talking about a common sense exemption for this project in this case, in this place? And I think, for me, that would particularly go back to referring to the existing neighborhood plan, remove any kind of statement about the community area from the findings and evidence, because that's where I get worried, is the assumption that we know what the people of that community are going to want to do prior to them actually saying so. Thank you.
Staff, did you need to respond to that, or?
Yeah, I think staff is happy. We appreciate that feedback. Again, we also are trying to do new and different things, and we very much hear and appreciate that. I think that staff would be interested in being able to take the time to update the findings to make that clearer. And so I'm not sure, and this is what I was trying to consult, if we're able to do that on the fly today, or if that is something that staff could take some time and continue to a date certain to refine, to meet those, to address that concern. So perhaps we could either trail the item or take a brief recess to allow staff and county council to confer, to then come back with a recommendation on process.
So, go ahead.
Well, staff has already got a lot of strike through and underline in the proposed resolution that's attached to the errata memo. So I'm thinking if there are more comments from other members of the dais about changes they would want to see in the resolution, we would hear them now before we potentially recess and do edits.
So would it be better just to go through I guess the rest of the commission, if they had any questions, and maybe the presentation, and then at the end bring it back to the staff and the commission after all has been said and done? Because I think it's partially very important that we do need housing, and if it's all in terms of legalities and in terms of all the research that was done, one way or another, I think that's important, as Commissioner Deal said, that we do need housing, and so whichever way it goes, I would support something that would hopefully get us some of the housing, because we do need, as Commissioner Deal and most of all the commissioners feel that that's important. So with that, I will ask any other commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Hartzell.
Could you walk me through the inclusionary housing situation? I see that there's a state guidance that's overruling the requirements, and I just want to understand that a little bit better.
Yes.
Hi, Darby Marshall, County Housing Program Manager, while she brings that up. This is a kind of a unique situation. The state density bonus law kind of establishes, if you will, a floor for how the minimum amount of affordable housing that has to be in place. And it may redistribute the affordability levels. The county can still apply its inclusionary housing requirements on top of it. And in this case, what we've done is looked at the project, and it would have required one very low or one low income unit and two moderate income units. Under the state density bonus, to get the additional lots that they requested, they needed a minimum of 10%. So that would have given us the 3 units that we ended up with. And we don't have the flexibility to make those lower, to increase the affordability levels. So we rounded it out at the moderate income, just because that's what the state law says. And we can't layer the requirements. There was a state court case that said you can't layer additional units on top.
So when you say you don't have the flexibility, it's because of the state regulation?
Correct.
Got it.
And density bonus is very confusing because there are a lot of options that the applicant has. And this is the option that they chose, is to satisfy it using the moderate income affordability level.
I mostly understand this. I'm wondering if there's anything else you can tell me about the state guidance that might give me more context. It's not intended as a trick question. You could just say,
Yeah,
no.
it's not a simple answer. There's a very long list of, there's 3 very long tables of percentages of, for very low, low, moderate, and how much density bonus percentage you have to give versus how much percentage of each project at each of those affordability levels. But it's only at one affordability level. The state doesn't blend them the way the inclusionary housing ordinance does.
Got it.
So it's all one affordability or none. And the builder's remedy works the same way.
Okay. Thank you.
Just, it's a follow-up on the same issue. Again, you're saying that the state doesn't allow, but our local inclusionary does, and we could still do it, right? It's just not recommend that we do it. Is that correct?
So the inclusionary housing ordinance would require 3.8 affordable units, and it would be distributed as 1 low and 2 moderate. Because of the state density bonus and the way that it works, they're already providing 3 affordable units. And since you're not allowed to add more units to that, we didn't feel we had the authority to require the 1 low-income unit. Additionally, the applicant made the case that low-income units for sale in this market are not financially viable products to construct and sell, especially on a subdivision of this size where you really don't have a lot of lots or units to spread that subsidy out. So we accepted and the HAC accepted the applicant's assertion that moderate income was appropriate.
So just to clarify, kind of a follow-up, the ordinance requires 3 point something, right? 3.5, 3.6. We're asking for 3. You're saying that we can't ask for 1 low income and 2 moderate?
Correct.
And that's because why? Can you explain why again?
Because they have invoked the density bonus, the state density bonus law.
Which is separate from our local ordinance, right?
Correct, but
We can still adopt a local ordinance.
you can still adopt the local ordinance,
correct.
but there was a court case that doesn't allow you to stack things and rearrange the density bonus affordability. So because of the way the state law on density and the county ordinance on density bonus is set up, it's all one affordability level, which is different from the way our inclusionary ordinance is.
Let me just clarify. Is the applicant saying that he's going to challenge it in court? Or you're assuming that he's going to challenge it in court?
No, I'm not, no.
Okay. Well, we could ask the applicant the same question. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? If not, then we're going to go ahead and open a public hearing and let the agent or property owner come and make a presentation.
Morning, Chair Gonzalez, members of the commission, Anthony Lombardo, behalf of the Guard subdivision. I'll try and answer a couple of the questions from the commissioners to address the couple of the issues. Starting with the ag buffer, yes, every other house on that street is inside of 200 feet, all the existing homes, because there was no ag buffer when they were built, so they just have to meet the setback from the street. In this case, the guards, that's the people's GARD is their name. The guards' home is within that buffer. The detention basin's within the buffer, and the side lot of of that lot number 1 is within that 200 feet. But all of that the new lot will be far further back than any other house on the street, including the existing guard home. That was considered by the Ag Advisory Committee, and they did recommend approval with a reduced buffer for Lot 1 because we're not only further back than any other house on the street, but we also are putting in screening, buffering vegetation, and a physical barricade, a sound wall, which is a solid structure between Bronda and the subdivision. On the issue of you may recall we were here about a year ago, and our chicken sheds were the cause of our year delay. Probably a funny joke there with chicken sheds being chicken something else, but ultimately we came to concurrence with the planning department or the HCD that they could put a condition that we remove the unpermitted sheds and other material that the guards have on the site once the application is approved prior to the final map, because the applicant doesn't own the property. It's still owned by the guard family who live in the house. And so if the project's approved and once the project begins, then we can remove the chicken habitation that's there now. On the inclusionary housing question, yes, the state has made it clear to the county in prior applications that the county's inclusionary housing policies are not consistent with state law and are not allowed to be enforced, as they would be in exceedance of the approved inclusionary housing density. And we've discussed this. We've had this discussion before on other small single-family subdivisions. It's really not financially feasible for either the home builder or for the person moving into the home to put a low or very low income unit into a private street, private drainage residential subdivision, because the costs associated with that are high. By the time you finish adding up all the costs of living there, you'd have to give the house away basically to the person in order for them to be able to live there. So what is being proposed is still buildings which are effectively cost more to build than they can be sold for, and that will add an additional financial burden to the remaining market rate homes. But that's what the state allows you to exact from the applicant. And as Darby said, that was supported by your Housing Advisory Committee. So the Housing Advisory Committee that looks at the inclusionary housing compliance found that this solution was an appropriate one. As to the categorical exemption, I find myself in an unusual position of agreeing with Commissioner Deal again, that probably in the year that we had between our last appearance and now, something else could have been done, but here we are. We don't want to delay obviously the housing project any farther. I think there is another exemption that could be applicable, which is the infill exemption, because clearly, as you'll see, and if we could go to the PowerPoint, I've got a little better picture of the neighborhood, because it is clearly, there was a good one. As you can see, the guards, where the word site is the guard property, and as you can see, it is for sure infill. This also gives you some idea, in answer to Commissioner Roberts' question about the relevant orientation of the other homes on the street. Next slide, please. There you can see the existing home and the sheds we were talking about a minute ago that'll be removed as a part of the project. Next, please. That's how it looks from the street today. Next, please. That I think staff showed you that already with the configuration of the lots and the setback from veranda. Next. That's a blow up, which is a little hard to read, but gives you idea of the location of the sound wall and the vegetation, screening vegetation will be planted. Next, please. This is not Veranda Road, it's actually in the city of Marina, but that gives you some idea of what the streetscape will be with the sound wall and the vegetation that'll be planted along the front of the property when it matures. That's part of the incentive that Darby talked about. Again, that's pursuant to state law as a fee waiver for the inclusionary units. Next, please. So I guess we find it categorically exempt, hopefully adopt the findings such as they are, and we respectfully request you approve the subdivision, which is going to give us, and just for some frame of reference, this is truly sort of by its nature moderate in design. The homes are a minimum of about 1,400 square feet, which is a very modest home, up to about 2,000 square feet. So these are not McMansions or large, vacation homes. These are truly, I've heard the term used recently, the missing middle. I don't know who came up with that or where it came from, but it's being used now to refer to sort of where do the normal people live, or normal is probably not the right word, but the working people live that have can't afford to live in Pebble Beach and but can't afford to buy a home, and that's what Mr. Nava is coming up, designing this project to be. So thank you very much. The applicants here, if you have any questions about the architecture or the design or anything, and we look forward to getting going. Thank you.
If you can just wait, I wanted to see if the commissioners had any questions of you, commissioners? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to go ahead and continue with the public hearing. And we have, if anybody here in the chambers wants to address the commission, please state your name, and you have about 3 minutes to make your presentation. Anybody in the chambers wishing to address the commission? Seeing none, do we have anybody in Zoom or any emails regarding this particular item?
We do not have any additional emails or hands up on Zoom.
Thank you for that. And then I'll bring it back to the staff to see if there are any comments, questions, clarifications. Madam Secretary?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make one clarification for the record. The state did not suggest that our inclusionary housing ordinance is not consistent with state law and our application of it is inappropriate. What the state indicated is that they have a concern that given the additional affordability requirements, that in and of itself could pose a barrier to housing, absent of it being analyzed as a potential constraint to housing, which is why we consider it on a case-by-case basis. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I guess we bring it back to the commission for questions, comments, clarifications. Do we need to address the issue as far as Commissioner Deal's concerned regarding some of the findings, or do we need to take a break at this point to address this, staff? Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. I just wanted to weigh in and say that I support the common sense exemption if we can remove any larger implications. And my understanding from the staff report is they didn't find that this project was appropriately subject to the infill exemption. So if we want to move forward, my suggestion is that we review the common sense exemption finding and see if we can narrow it down to be specific. Just that's what I would suggest, and I would hope that with a break, staff could probably do that. I don't think it requires a huge lot of revision.
So would a 15-minute break, 20-minute break be appropriate? Would that be enough for the staff to make those changes? So at this point, we'll take about a 15-minute break. If we need a little bit more time, I'll check with the staff, and then we'll come back. Thank you very much, everyone. roll call, so I believe that we want to trail this item to after item number 4, so that they would have enough time to be able to make sure that they have all the information correct. So we're going to trail the item. I would need a motion, and,
I think you just get to do that, Mr. Chair.
I was informed, but anyways, one way or the other, we're with that, then, thank you. We're going to go ahead and trail this item to after item number 4, so that the staff has enough time to go ahead and make sure that we have all the correct information so that we can move on with this particular item. And with that, we're going ahead to item number 4, and that's REF 250006, the Monterey County General Plan Implementation and Housing Element and Annual Progress Report, and has A, consider the 2024 Annual Progress Report for the Monterey County General Plans. B, consider the 2024 Annual Progress Report for the 2024-2031 Housing Element. And C, to receive a verbal update on the pipeline, et cetera. And D, consider and provide direction regarding priorities for the 2025-26 Long-Range Planning Work Program and proposed CEQA action. And so with that, will the staff go ahead and make their presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If our IT support is able to do full screen for the slides, that would be appreciated. Yeah. Yeah. There's a way to make it full screen. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Melanie Beretti, Chief of Planning. I'm joined by Darby Marshall, our Housing Program Manager, here today to report our 2025 annual reports for our general plan, our housing element, and including our long-range work program. So the action before the Commission today is to consider the 2024 Annual Progress Report for the Monterey County General Plans and for the 2024 to 2031 housing element, as well as consider recommending that the Board of Supervisors authorize that the Housing Community Development Director submit the progress reports to the State Office of Planning and Research and State Department of Housing and Community Development. Also to receive a verbal update on the pipeline of new housing development in unincorporated Monterey County, as well as consider and provide direction regarding the priorities for the 2025 to 26 long-range planning work program. So for the planning year 2024 to 2025, so that covers essentially each year by April 1st, we do recognize we are late. Each year by April 1st, we are to submit an annual progress report on our general plan and housing elements. So our 2024 work program is actually April 1st through March 30th of the subsequent year. So during that time, so the general plan and the long-range planning work program implementation is primarily accomplished through the county's Housing and Community Development Department's Advanced Planning Team, which is a team of 7 that currently has 1 vacancy that we're working on filling, plus the Chief of Planning and as needed Director of Housing Community Development. In addition, other departments will support certain aspects of that long-range work program, and in particular, there's a handful of items that the County Administrative Office, their Sustainability, as well as Cannabis Office often will carry forward. So just pointing out Exhibit A is the general plan implementation annual progress report, and Exhibit E to the staff report provides a more detailed discussion of the accomplishments from last year, so I'm going to keep it very high level. So overall, we were able to make progress on 28 work program tasks, 5 of which count towards general plan implementation tasks, and those are marked with an asterisk in this presentation. Of those 28, we were able to accomplish 4, one of which is specifically a general plan implementation activity, including the completion of the Salinas Valley Zone 2C groundwater basin investigation. The board was able to accept that study this year. And in this upcoming, implementation year, we will be implementing the recommendations, including the update to General Plan Policy PS 1.3 as a result of that study being complete. In addition, staff and the advanced planning team serves as staff to the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency of the County of Monterey. So we were able to process in tandem with the county current planning team and East Garrison final phase amendments that have processed through and received final approval from the Department of Finance in the fall of 2024. Also, we completed our role with the Restricted Covenants Education Project and Equity Timeline, which included, we published 3 story maps of the timelines, also distributed educational materials to all of the Monterey County Free Public Libraries in the county. And we also developed a restrictive covenants removal map that is now being continually updated as the assessor's office makes progress through doing the state mandated redacting of that restricted covenant language. In addition, the board took action and approved our vacation rental ordinances. Those are in effect in the inland area. And in fact, next week is the effective date by which individuals in the inland area are required to come into compliance and or come into comply, including coming into apply for permits or cease the operations that are not permitted. In the coastal zone, we are waiting for Coastal Commission consideration, which we anticipate in July. In addition, there were 2 local coastal plan amendments that moved forward this year. One was a historic resources zoning overlay in the Del Monte Forest. The other was a land use designation change in the Moss Landing Community Plan area. Oops, sorry, technical difficulties on my notes. Okay. So what staff really wants to focus on with the commission and again and then subsequently when we go to the Board of Supervisors is really getting input regarding the priorities for 2025-26. We have a list so our long-range work program has identified approximately 80 tasks at this moment in time. There are often tasks added as well as tasks get underway. Sometimes it breaks off into multiple different tasks. But there are about 80 tasks at this time identified, of which 35 are identified as in various stages of completion or had prior work that took place on them. So really when we are looking at how do we allocate our staffing, our fiscal and other resources towards such a large task list. What staff did this year is really look at those top 10 to 12 priorities that we're proposing, and to our understanding are those top priorities that we will be allocating resources to. And for example, at times when we need to be all hands-on, say for doing a data request, which we're in the process of response for our housing element cycle update, we redirect staff as long as there's not an immediate critical deadline on something else to support those efforts. So we have in this list really a huge emphasis on these very large planning efforts that have been underway, the housing element, not just completing that housing element, but completing the rezoning and then commencing its implementation. So to really holding that as a top priority into this coming year. We've also been really dedicating time towards permit process streamlining. That's very critical, and we did have direction from the board to do streamlining efforts. We've been focusing to date on kind of internal process updates, and staff is really looking to, in tandem with implementation of our housing element and some of the streamlining efforts we'll need to do as a part of that, continuing that effort. We also have various community plans that are underway, including Castroville Community Plan, Moss Landing Community Plan, and Chular, all of which have direct funding. And then, of course, continuing to make progress on our Big Sur Coast Land Use Plan update, which is well underway as well. We have our other mandatory housing element, general plan element updates for safety element, environmental justice, as well as viewing the Carmel River floodplain restoration environmental enhancement due to where we are in that project and significant funding and prioritization from the board, as well as maintaining our efforts on vacation rental ordinances, the ADUs, as well as four-doored habitat management. So again, this is from staff's perspective, those projects that fall in that top 12, we're going to continue through the project and then come back for commission's input on these priorities. With that, I'd really like to hand the presentation over to my colleague, Darby, who can talk about our housing element progress, as well as our unincorporated area housing pipeline report. And again, just want to iterate that the county is in the process of updating its housing element. So while we are within the sixth planning cycle, which is 2024 to 2031, we are concurrently tracking our housing implementation towards that RHNA while completing that plan. Thanks, Darby.
Darby Marshall, County Housing Program Manager. 2024 was the first full year of the sixth cycle housing element. We had an RHNA allocation of 3,300 units, and they were broken down between very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. For clarification, when we talk about above moderate, that does include the general plan's workforce housing units. So that affordability level in terms of RHNA is just above moderate, so we don't get separate credit for that. In the first year, and then the state also gave us some prorated credit for units in late 2023. We had 89 low-income units permitted and 192 above moderate units permitted. This was a little bit slow from prior years. Next slide, please. The units we're seeing mostly single-family detached, but we did see those 45 units in multifamily structures were all employer-sponsored housing, which continues to be the only source of new multifamily units in the unincorporated areas of the county. We also saw a fair number of accessory dwelling units constructed. There's two kinds of ADUs. There's the junior ADU, which is a carve-out within an existing home that has some kind of cooking facilities, and it may have shared or separate sanitation facilities. And then there is the freestanding ADU and then the detached ADU. We saw about 27% of the ADUs that were detached or JADUs being produced in Castroville. So there's a clear indication that those are probably going to be rentals. The rest of them are remarkably in places like Santa Lucia and Pebble Beach, and they are all usually pushing the state's 1,200 square foot limit to be considered an ADU. So these are larger units that are coming along. If you would turn to exhibit, what is that? D, we have the housing pipeline. This is something that the commission has asked for in the past. We've broken it down into three categories. We have the units that have been approved but remain, and then we have within that units that have been constructed to date, and then the units that are remaining. Where we know because of conditions of approval, or in the case of 845 East Laurel, what we expect the final affordability distribution to be. We have broken that information out. We have a number of projects that came in late last year, early this year under the Builder's Remedy. The Builder's Remedy is a streamlined approach for development that guarantees a fixed percentage of affordable units, similar to density bonus, but without the extra units. One challenge that we have with the Builder's Remedy is it was changed effective January 1st. And so up until this year, all the units had to be very low or low, 80% AMI. This year, the state changed the law, so there is now a sliding scale depending on the depth of affordability. But again, like with the density bonus, it is, you're going to do very extremely low, very low, low, or moderate income. It's not distributed the way our inclusionary housing ordinance distributes affordability. Those projects are more than likely going to be permitted and constructed during the current cycle, just because of the way that they came in. And then we have a number of other projects that are currently under review. Some of them have been to the Planning Commission once or more than once. One of them was GARD. All told, at the end of the day, we have more than enough units, above moderate income units, that have been either approved or are in some phase of consideration to meet our above market RENA obligations. We're still very short on all the other affordability levels, and that's going to be a continuing challenge for us to meet as we move forward. And that's what I have for right now. Thank you.
So staff recommends that the commission find that submitting these annual reports is not a project under CEQA, that you receive the 2024 annual progress report for the Monterey County General Plan, as well as the 2024-2031 housing element, that you recommend to the board that that HCD submit these reports as required by the state, that you deem the pipeline of new housing development received, and consider and provide direction on those priorities for the 2025-2026 long-range planning work program. Staff's available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Deal?
I always have questions. I was hoping somebody else might want to weigh in. I'd like to go back to start with the priorities and understand better how these things fit together. I forget, I didn't take the page number, but I think it was last of Ms. Beretti's.
Yeah, if we could share the presentation, I'm on slide number 4.
Thank you.
Yes.
First is just a personal question, which is, at this point in time, why is the Fort Ord Habitat Resource Management Plan still a high priority, and what would it accomplish? What will it accomplish when completed?
Yeah, so that's one where we have completed substantial work. It actually is a part of implementation of our general plan, the Fort Ord Master Plan policies. And because we've completed significant amount of work, we've got a consultant contract that we've also are implementing. It has outside funds, so it's utilizing funds that don't impact the general fund. And so it's one that, by not keeping it as a priority and finishing it off, staff feels is more detrimental to the public and use of public funds than continuing to move that forward. So some of the consideration that we really have been trying to do in the last few years with the long-range work program is to truly stay committed to a project once it is underway, so we get to completion, because there's so much additional work and costs that are incurred with each delay of these projects.
Through the chair, so does that use outside consultants primarily, or is this a function of our in-house staff?
Yeah, the plan itself and the environmental review for that plan is under contract with an outside consultant. It does, for example, we do have an administrative draft that we've received, so it does, when we get the administrative draft, it does take staff time to do substantive review, but we are not doing the legwork for the majority of that project.
Thank you. So that gets me to it would help me, I don't know if it's true for others, to understand when we're looking at the priorities, where we are with respect to a project. So that it really helps clarify why it's on there and what impacts it would have on the rest of the things that are on there. But standing alone, it's a little harder for me to take in. I don't know if that's of any use to anybody else. So going back up, the thing that jumps out at me from reading this list is how many of the items are interconnected. And I'm looking for a better understanding of how the staff is looking at interconnected projects where there may be economies of scale. For example, very simply, in a really big picture way, a community plan is definitely related to the housing element. A safety element update is related to an update of the community plan. You know, it's just sort of things are really interrelated functions that if we look at them as a standalone might be more imposing, that if they're related to something that's already happening, permit streamlining is related to community plans, you know? How can we take advantage of those relationships to facilitate moving forward as quickly as possible on these important projects?
Yeah, staff really appreciates that input, and that absolutely is something that we actively engage in the conversation through our advanced planning team. We do meet regularly, and we do kind of engage those conversations. So, for example, as we were moving forward with the Castroville Community Plan update, and as our housing element was moving forward, those two caught up to each other in a way where it became evident that we needed to put a hold on the Castroville Community Plan to get some finalization on the sites inventory as it related to Castroville, to make sure that we weren't doing anything within the Castroville Community Plan that would subsequently be inconsistent or would not completely consider and incorporate those housing elements. So that's one example where we kind of regularly check in on projects to make sure where we're at and really assess, do we continue to move forward? How can we make sure that we get the timing correct on them? In other cases, for example, our housing element, our safety element, our environmental justice element, those ones are all very intertwined, absolutely. The same thing kind of happens. We look at where we want to continue to move those forward concurrently. For example, a lot of the input that we've been getting through the environmental justice outreach, we are also incorporating into our housing element, even if we're not asking, even if it's not directly housing element outreach, and vice versa. So we often try to make sure that our outreach components are timed so that we can kind of cross-utilize the information as appropriate, and make sure that we have sequential stepping where we need to have consistencies between policies and goals. So it's not a perfect science, but staff really does actively work on that. The same as when we're looking at where we're at with the individual community plans to keep those moving forward, but where if there's opportunity for efficiency to have the same conversation around wildfire management. Is it just a Big Sur, or is it a broader conversation in a way that keeps our activities moving forward?
Thank you. And I don't know, in my mind, I start looking at the arrows that connect things. And I know that's too complicated for a report of this type, but it does, in my mind, influence the priorities. Because if you've got something that you can make significant progress on because of something else you're doing, I would really like to see us register that. So it's not like, oh, my project gets more attention because it's my project. It's because we actually have some elements of it going forward elsewhere. And that would matter to me if I were in a position to dictate things that, like the Board of Supervisors is, hint. Thank you, that's really helpful. And then just a sort of an informational question. I know we're all looking forward to the vacation rental ordinance coastal certification. Have we any indication of the commission's thoughts about that? Has the staff made any statements that give us either hope or fear around that thus far?
So generally speaking, we did work with Coastal Commission staff. We tried to be as incorporating of their feedback in the process. Preliminarily, staff has suggested that they believe they can support the ordinances. They have not actually crafted their recommendation and report, so there's still room for that. But yeah, preliminarily, staff is confident that that at least at the staff level, Coastal Commission should be able to stand behind the ordinances. Also, generally speaking, one thing that has shifted over the time that we've been developing our our vacation rental ordinances is that the Coastal Commission is more mindful of housing needs, affordable housing, and some of those more local concerns. And so, in their more recent decisions and consideration, they have definitely been much more open to kind of that jurisdiction level, how we locally balance those within our regulations, as opposed to being a little more directive on, must have rental access. So staff's confident.
Well, I think cautiously optimistic is where I'm at, and I would relate to the folks who asked me. And then the steps for an ordinance of this sort goes to Coastal Commission, takes action, and if they were to approve it, would come back to the Board of Supervisors and then go into effect. Is that what happens?
If there are no changes, the board adopted it with an intent to adopt. So if there's no changes that come from the Coastal Commission, it would go into effect. I believe it's a 2-month or 60-day window, or to come into compliance, the typical window for effectiveness.
Thank you. And one more, if I could, Mr. Chair. This is just, I'm so hopeful that, we've all been, I think, but I'm so hopeful that the ADUs were going to help us with our provision of affordable housing. And Mr. Marshall, you talked about the ADUs that we believed in Castroville were designed for rental use, but then you talked about other areas where the ADUs were detached, larger, and we weren't certain about that use. Do we have any insights whether those are being, how they're being used? Is there any feedback that we get from the ADU process to help us understand the impact of this particular kind of ADU on our housing stock?
We have not been collecting that information. So we do not really have any information on that.
Do you think there's a way that we could? I mean, not directive, but just in terms of informationally, is there any hope that you would have? Because that would be very helpful for me to understand whether these are being used for a caretaker to live on site, for somebody who was a part-time resident, whether they were being saved for guests when they come, or what?
I'm sure that we could craft a question for the application process that would be purely voluntary.
Yeah.
But we could try to do that.
It would be great information from my point of view to have that if there were an appropriate way to do it without adding more requirements for anybody. It's just, I feel like we're guessing, and I've been so committed to the notion that this was going to help. I'd like to know whether it did or not. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Deal. Commissioner Gomez?
Looking at the 2025-26 priority tasks, where are we at in terms of the Pajaro Community Plan? And then it's that.
Yeah, so the Pajaro Community Plan, it's in the queue. We've not started it. We've not taken action on it. And because the community plans are such large undertakings, we're really looking at it as something else large needs to fall off of our plate. But that is the next substantial plan that's in our queue. So I am not anticipating that, given what I am seeing with the various stages that all of these projects are in, realistically, I'm not anticipating that that we're gonna free up enough staff time to make substantive efforts on Pajaro. What I really am anticipating is hopefully with our housing element and other general plan elements, with those coming to completion during this next year, that is then when staff will be able to reevaluate and put Pajaro in the queue and start to look at the budget going into the next fiscal year, because we will need funding for that.
The reason why I ask is because our prior chairman, Ms. Deal, had mentioned repeatedly that there's a great opportunity for synergy because there's a lot of different planning that's already taking place. So maybe that should be part of what we weigh in terms of how we decide what to prioritize, what else is happening there that could benefit the development of the plan, and maybe reduce our costs in terms of doing what we want to do in terms of the plan there. Secondly, I wanted to ask, this relates to a regional housing allocation. One of the hottest categories that you have is very low income housing. What is it that we're doing? I saw that we've made very little progress. What is it that we're going to do to make sure that we meet the goals? I know we have the housing element that we're still working with the state, but what is it specifically? Because this might be one opportunity here where we could put one unit, right? Which would help a little bit. But what is it that we're doing to ensure that we have opportunities to try to meet that goal?
The inclusionary housing ordinance does require that 6% of the units in any given subdivision or multifamily project be affordable to like very low income, and then another 6% at low. Other than that, the county has no specific policy or programs in place. Our biggest challenge right now is the availability of funding to provide organizations like CHISPA or Mid-Peninsula Housing, where we can provide local funding that they use to leverage tax credits or other state and federal subsidy programs. The other thing that's going on right now is the county is doing a facility master plan, looking at all the county-owned property to see where there may be opportunity for us to develop residential uses. And in those cases, we would probably prioritize higher levels of very low and low income units as part of that property.
I know that recently I read in the paper, right, that the county did approve a project with Eden Housing. Is that part of is that the numbers for us or for the city? Because the property is in the city limits, correct?
Yeah, so I was going to say, so in our kind of immediate, very low and low affordable pipeline for county, the Eden project, which is on county property, we did work out in those agreements that the county is issuing the entitlements and the building permits, so we will get the RENA credits on that project. It'll be in 2 phases for a total of 132 units. Also, with the approval of the East Garrison final phase amendment, that also allows the phase 3 affordable housing, which is 65 units, to be constructed concurrent and on top of the town center by CHISPA. So in fact, the purchase agreement between CHISPA and the developer at East Garrison is coming for review in May to the board acting as the successor agency to former redevelopment. So we're seeing progress on both of those. And I do know that Eden is working right now to submit applications for this spring round of notice of funding availability for both the state and both the state as well as, I believe, the city of Salinas.
Is there the mention of low and very low income housing is usually is done in conjunction with actual rental property? Is there any projects that we foresee that involve maybe sweat equity or involve a private developer actually building some of those units?
The CHISPA Castroville Oaks property may include 90 units of sweat equity units. Whether they can get the subsidies to make them affordable at the very low and the low income levels is going to be the challenge. I think what we're seeing mostly right now is the sweat equity projects that I'm most familiar with lately would be people self-help in King City and their Mustang property, and they have another one in Greenfield that is in the planning stages. And they're really looking more at the moderate income. It's just the costs are too high to make low and very low income units without huge subsidies from other than some organization like USDA, which has limits on how much of a subsidy they can invest.
One final question. Is the county considering at all workforce housing themselves for their county workforce at the present time?
The county is a participant in the Gold State Finance Authority, and they do have a program to help county employees qualify for mortgages. And I think the last time I looked, they had something like 200 county employees that they had assisted, but the county is not itself looking at purchasing and maintaining homes for or selling homes to employees at this time.
I'm thinking like the county owns land, right? I'm looking at it as an opportunity in existing county land, not acquiring additional land. The county owns land. And as an opportunity maybe to partner up with a private developer to do maybe half and half. That's not something the county at all is exploring at the present time.
I think generally where conversations have been to encourage employee-sponsored housing. I am not aware of any specific initiative for the county to be looking to partner with a developer to construct employee-sponsored housing specifically for county employees. That I'm not familiar with.
Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you. Maybe you can clarify for me, if we were to remove all the employer-sponsored H-2A housing from that low and very low income bracket, would there be anything built, or is that only employee-sponsored H-2A housing that's been built?
In the sixth cycle, it is only employer-sponsored H-2A housing.
I say thank you. I say that because I just want to clarify, because I've encountered this with various community members who don't understand that no one in the county has actually built any housing available in those brackets for residents and families of Monterey County. And I guess on that note, like the other commissioners have been talking about this kind of synergistic approach, and I'm going to throw my opinion once again and my gripe once again that Pajaro Community Plan is still not on this list. And yet it would tie in perfectly with permit process streamlining with this, I guess, environmental justice element, because this is a location that we could be really removing a lot of the red tape and barriers and costs associated with development and potentially building low-income housing or very low-income housing that is not employer-sponsored H-2A housing, something that's actually available to our residents if we shoehorned that in there. My understanding was this was going to be in the 25-26 year, and to hear that it's still being pushed off is, I cannot appropriately in this forum express my disappointment, to put it lightly, in that. And I understand staff's constraints, but that's a huge bummer. And I don't see the forward progress of the community that I live in and that I'm emotionally and financially invested in going anywhere fast when it continually is put on the back burner in favor of other things in other parts of the county.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Deal?
As everyone knows, I've been puzzling about this for many, many years. And understanding and respecting Commissioner Shaw's comments, I want to once again suggest that the recovery planning process in Pajaro has obtained funding. Were it possible to work with that process to obtain initial funding for the community plan, it would seem to me to really be one of those synergies, for the want of any less fashionable word, one of those ways where we could take what we're doing and make the best possible use of it, which is what efficiency means to me. But that is a different funding stream. And if through recovery we can identify the overall community planning effort as an important component in streamlining progress for recovery in the long run, maybe if we just put a little effort in now, we'd get a lot back later. And so it's not just what resources we use, it's how we invest them to get the most out of them at the other end. And I'm continually frustrated by this sense that this is an opportunity going begging. I really want to continue to advocate in any way possible for us to look at ways to take what we know we have to do now, what's ongoing now, and make that the stepping off place for the larger process that really it is. I mean, it's a junior community plan now. So just, I know it's old news. I know there's nothing anybody can really do about it except to hear me talk again, but I've got to back up my fellow commissioner here about the level of concern. And in my mind, the concern about lost opportunity as well as the rest of the things that we've talked about here.
If staff may, through the chair. Really want to acknowledge the concerns and comments about Pajaro. We actually did previously, so about a year or so ago, when they were looking at how to allocate the funding that was coming in, there was a line item that was included in that would get the Pajaro Community Plan underway. In fact, there was a very substantial pushback from the community of wanting that funding to go directly into the community for benefits now. And so that line item actually did get pulled out. So it doesn't change the frustration that we have not gotten that underway. We also did, when we were ready to embark on the Chular Community Plan and start to engage financing there, we also did reiterate confirmation that that's the next community plan that we're underway, and the board did support that. So the best I can say is Pajaro is absolutely that next top priority. The truth of it is, because we're further behind on our housing element, it's taking substantially longer in effort, and the other general plan elements are then a bit delayed. That's at this juncture the bigger barrier, because we had hoped that those would have fallen off sooner from our plates to accommodate Pajaro. So we hear that. I will absolutely convey that. We will keep that in mind. It literally is that next large one up. But again, just being practical of where I think everything's going to land this year. I think this is the right where you'll see significant progress made. I also did want to, I just got some additional information that I'd forgotten about, just in terms of county workforce housing. Natividad Medical Center actually is running a pilot program that would provide housing subsidies to employees. So they do have a pilot program. I'm not very familiar with it, but I do understand that that's underway. It's possible that that pilot program might inform subsequent programs, both more broadly for NMC as well as the county as a whole.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Hartzell?
The housing pipeline, I love the housing pipeline on page 37, thank you. Sort of echoing some of the other commissioners' comments, it does seem like we have a long way to go in meeting the requirements. I'm wondering if there's a strategy for that anywhere in the back end of HCD that's sort of underway.
I mean, I think the significant strategy is our housing element, which lays out the housing plan, and that kind of goes back to one of those top priorities are really efforts to streamline where we can and implement that housing plan for what's going to best and more quickly facilitate the type of housing that we need and want to see to satisfy our arena. Also, part of that, we had been making progress on our inclusionary housing ordinance, which is just one piece of the puzzle, as well as we've tried a couple years in a row to get a more robust affordable housing trust fund underway. So there are pieces that are kind of all intertwined towards that, but no silver bullet. But those, I think, and I'll have Darby contribute and enhance on that.
One of the challenges is the county is not a developer. And so a lot of the projects, especially the ones that have been approved, for example, September Ranch, which is now been approved for almost 20 years, they are just now getting to the point where they're pulling construction contracts for horizontal. I don't think they've started the vertical yet. East Garrison was approved almost 20 years ago again. And we're still just now getting to the third phase. So a huge part of our challenge is these are things that have already been through the permitting process. They're out there, and it's the market that then has to deliver. And I'm very frustrated that I don't understand why, once you've invested all that time and effort to get through the permitting, it takes so long to actually begin construction and get us housing units. But it's not something that the county can control unless we control the land, have a development disposition agreement, or have a significant financial stake in the project. And that's part of what we're trying to get around is how do we come up with a way where the county can incentivize the quicker production of housing, especially through public resources to provide subsidies for the very low and the low income units.
And that work that you're doing, that's part of the housing element implementation?
Yeah, much of it is called out as programs or policies that we're going to implement in housing in our through implementation of our housing element.
Thanks.
Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that at the commission level, to Mr. Marshall's point, one of the things we thought was helpful, which was to make sure that when we have significant projects, the affordable housing units are timed so that they are not at the end of the game, that you have to at least build a significant number of them prior to moving into your more lucrative development plans. In your view, is that helpful?
Yes, it is helpful because it does get those units prioritized for construction sooner. But again, if the developer is not incentivized to move the market rate, wherever we prioritize construction of the affordable isn't going to happen because they're not worried about triggering a stop in their market rate production.
If I could follow up, do you feel that it's been a barrier to moving forward with these projects?
No, I don't. I think that the part of the challenge that we have with the inclusionary housing ordinance is the nature of development in this county. And when I went back and looked at 40 years worth of applications, something like 2/3 of them resulted in less than 19 units. And if you're applying 20% to that, that's not a whole lot of affordable units coming out of it. And that's only if they're all at that 19% threshold. Most of them are less than 10. And so our real challenge is the types of projects that we're seeing and that are being subjected to the inclusionary housing ordinance just aren't big enough to make an impact.
So an editorial comment through the chair. Yes, it's the unincorporated county. We shouldn't be building vast numbers of housing units except in our designated community areas where it should be made easier by the adoption of a community plan. Thanks.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Gomez?
Going back to the priority list, could you put it up? I'm assuming that the numbering of it, does that have nothing to do with the order of the priorities, or does it? I was just checking
Loosely. loosely, if I have to pull staff from, 6 through 12 to help support 1 through 5 on occasion, I will need to do that. But typically, no, they all kind of move together for when when there's a decision ready. So it's not a fixed. Also, for example, where we have grant funding, some of the ones that are higher up where we have either general plan augmentation funding or grant funding, because there are timelines associated with that. So again, when push comes to shove, to make sure we stay on timelines to not compromise funding as opposed to others. So those are kind of generally the approach.
Would it be okay, I guess that's kind of, I don't know how you came up with 12, would it be okay to add a 13th, which would be the Pajaro Community Plan? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to put it at the top, but at least it puts it on the list, right?
It would be adding it to the list of the 35 other ones that are also in some form that have been making progress. So if the commission would like to recommend that the board do that, we can bring that forward as a part of the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Seeing none, then I'm going to go ahead and open a public hearing. And if there is anybody in the chambers that would like to address the commission, this would be the time to come up and state your name for the record, and also you would have about 3 minutes. Seeing none, then I'll bring out, is there anybody on Zoom or emails that would like to address the commission?
There are no emails or any hands up on Zoom.
Okay, then we'll bring it back to the commission, and we need to have a motion and a second. So, Commissioner Deal?
Well, I'm going to sidetrack again and say, really quickly, can you remind me of the community areas designated in the general plan? It's a test.
Darn you. I can remind you of the priority ones. The highest priority are
I'm talking about them. My thought is, my side thought here, as somebody who thinks in that manner, is that community planning per se is something that contains a number of elements that are the same over every community plan. So if we develop a system for dealing with one part of the community planning process, then all other community plans can benefit from that. So I'm wanting to look at a way to look at all of the community areas which were the linchpin of the 2010 general plan to get the housing that we've all been fighting so hard to get. If we can look at a plan that takes all of them into account and looks at where we can take the infrastructure that we develop for developing a community plan and continue to move it along so that when we finish one part of one process on one plan, that particular team, that particular set of resources moves to the next community plan while we're continuing up the first community plan, rather than looking at each of them as a standalone process. That's, I don't know if it's even possible, but that's the kind of thing I mean when I'm talking about looking at how things are connected. Because how are they mechanically connected? How are those skills that we learn connected? How are those resources that have been honed into something that's useful connected? And that goes back to the recovery planning process, has certain kinds of ways that we've developed community outreach that would certainly be relevant to a community planning process in Chular as well as in Pajaro. So anyway, sorry about the side trip, Mr. Chair. I'll leave the rest of the moving things along to somebody better suited to it.
Thank you. So we need a motion and a second, and then we can go into discussion. Are you making a motion?
I'm prepared to make a motion that we adopt staff recommendation and that we add an item 13, which is to put the Pajaro Community Plan on the radar.
So Commissioner Gomez has made the motion. We need a second. Commissioner Mendoza has made this second, so we have a motion, a second under discussion. Any more discussion from the commissioners? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Then are we ready to go back to PLN 210223 Gart Malina, or do we need to move on to the next item, which is department report? This item?
Yeah,
Let me see if my memory serves me correctly. I think we were, again, back to item 3, PLN 210223. And we were supposed to make some changes or recommendations based on some of the recommendations and discussions. And so with that, in terms of some of the findings, et cetera, and staff, please take it away.
IT support, would you please share through HDMI? Through HDMI. Could you repeat the request for me?
Media team, can you please share presentation using HDMI?
Staff took into consideration the recommendation by Commissioner Deal that this CEQA section for the Guard subdivision project should specify the neighborhood plan for Baranda from 1987 is in place, and it is not in this particular case conflicting with that, and also that the use of this common sense exemption is expressly due to the circumstance of this particular case. So I did prepare several highlighted new underline strike-throughs in that section. There seems to be a technical problem, but staff would like to take this time with the floor to, while we have this delay. Oh, new connection. There we go. Super. Looks like I found it. While we're waiting for this technical issue to be resolved, staff would like to bring attention of the planning commissioners to the letter from Monterey Salinas Transit that was shared with you on the dais and came in late in the day on April 8th. So in this letter, the MST staff requested that pedestrian improvements off-site be added to this project to provide access to the nearest transit stop, and they named stop ID 3212 Westridge Parkway at Davis, which is 0.4 miles away. So during the hearing and discussion with our engineering services staff and the applicant has agreed to add a condition of approval to put in ADA compliant sidewalk to that transit stop. The letter also indicates that they'd like to see language having to do with complete streets and ADA compliant sidewalks, ramps, and safe crossings added into the resolution text. Staff would not recommend that we do that since we already have a heavily edited resolution, but wants to bring attention that Mr. Nava, the developer, has a very has provided staff a plan for the site improvements that was found complete street compliant by our engineering services staff, and they're very happy with the way that it is presented to be built out. I'm going to use email because it's open.
Chair, for the record, we're having technical difficulties with the HDMI hookup, so our media team is asking that we share the edits a different way, and that's what we're doing right now, so bear with us.
Would you prefer that I do that? Okay. Thank you.
Chair, we should be good to go now.
Good, go ahead.
Daniel, are you able to share that screen again, or staff right in the room and on Zoom? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we overcame. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. So these are edits to the California Environmental Quality Act exemption finding, and everything that was done by staff within the hearing is shown in yellow highlighting. So the first thing is the project meets common sense exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15061B3, due to the specific circumstances of this project location. And we then refer to the review of project against Appendix G environmental checklist that was already there, and now we're changing that to evidence C, so we're moving that up. So right after the quick project description, we have an evidence C due to the existing surroundings, quality of the project site, and project design was added. And then the rest of this is just a reorganization of old evidence F, which went through all of the sections of a standard Appendix G checklist as staff reviews why there are no reasonable possibility for specific significant effect on the environment. And I broke it up by putting them into bullets so it was easier to follow. That's the same as what you were presented. We removed reference to infill and discussed the project subdivision consistent with pattern density of surrounding neighborhood within a city sphere of influence, and as conditioned does not conflict with the land use that was already there. And I also added in, per recommendation from the Commissioner Deal, the project does not conflict with the 1987 Baranda Neighborhood Improvement Plan. So I added in just a little bit more when I saw another sentence should be there for mineral resources, now that they're broken out in bullets. All of this was already there, and it goes through what would normally be in a checklist, and we finish with traffic, and then I added a new bullet in response. So this would be part of the public transit bicycle pedestrian facilities review, and I added this yellow highlighted area that says in response to a letter from Monterey Salinas Transit, MST, to the Planning Commission that was provided prior to the April 9, 2025 hearing, seeking off-site pedestrian improvements, the applicant owner agreed to provide an ADA compliant sidewalk from the subdivision to the nearest MST bus stop, which is located at Westridge Parkway and Davis. Condition number 32 is now added. And then there were some edits to remove reference to the 2010 GPEIR and removing so this section was already edited to discuss there could have been infill exemption. Most criteria were met, and it already stated that the only thing that was missing was that there hadn't been a certified environmental document for land use planning within the last 5 years specific to the area. So then the next criteria list, instead of framing it as how it could have potentially been residential infill exemption, it's changed now to following criteria support the county's use of common sense exemption. The following thresholds that trigger exemption from statutory exemption are not crossed, and then reframing the CEQA guidelines section having to do just with why we're not crossing exemption thresholds for using a statutory exemption. Again, removing reference to infill. And I believe that is it. Everything else was proposed for a strike through in the errata memo that you received. So those are the staff's proposed changes in response to Commissioner Deal's very helpful comments, and staff is ready for any additional feedback.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or clarifications from the commission? Commissioner Deal?
With the indulgence of the chair, I'd be interested in whether the applicant's representative was agreeable to all this revision.
Thank you, Anthony Lombardo, on behalf of the applicant. Yes, all but one. The last minute request by MST that we build a half a mile, which is the distance of sidewalk from the frontage of this property to Westridge Parkway, we can't do. I don't even know if there's adequate public right-of-way to build a sidewalk on it that long. We're certainly willing to contribute our fair share of any cost of doing that, but we have no way of knowing whether that's even a feasible improvement, what the topography is of the area, what the street, the right-of-way is or isn't available to do it. You'd be talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional expense to build a 4/10 of a mile of sidewalk with which presumably has to be ADA compliant. I don't know. That would be an unquantifiable expense to the project at this point. We're certainly willing to, if MST has a plan to do this or some type of a program to do it, we're happy to contribute towards it. But making this applicant construct a sidewalk, frankly, in front of dozens or hundreds of other homes to Westridge Parkway is not reasonable, or as the courts would say, doesn't bear a nexus to the impact that this project would have. So everything else staff has described as fine. We just request that we're happy to have a condition that says we have to pay our fair share of that improvement, but paying for that improvement is not economically feasible, nor is it supported by any evidence in the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Well, go ahead, staff. No. Commissioners? Commissioner Deal?
Okay, I am persuaded that if there is a fair share language that we can dig up that says has enough specifics in it that we could include it, that would be fine with me rather than the construction of the improvement at this last minute. Otherwise, I would even say I don't think that's a deal breaker for me personally in this case. I would like, however, to propose that we might modify condition 18 to include, for the benefit of the MST folks, the safe street language in that existing condition about improvement plans, which I believe staff told us were already intended to fulfill that requirement, but we could certainly record it within the condition so that we had no question about that. And that way we would at least be giving a nod to the fact that we have read the MST letter and really support their overall goals. I'm only concerned about putting in fair share language if we don't know what it's a fair share of exactly. There's a lot of definition there, unless Public Works can provide us with a set understanding of that, because I'm not aware whether there's a plan or not. But maybe my suggestion would be that in existing condition 18 about improvement plans, we could reference the information staff gave us. The current proposed plans do incorporate that by saying they shall continue to incorporate the elements of the complete streets guidance that we have, whatever that might be. ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps and safe crossings or whatever. Anyway, that was my thinking, and I wanted to go back and just say, good job, you guys. I feel much more secure with the language that is currently proposed. I feel it's really clear on the record that we're talking about this project in this place, and that gives me great feeling of comfort. And so I really appreciate the extra effort, and I'm hoping that we can go ahead and at least do something about this project today rather than postponing it further.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Gomez?
Yeah, I'm prepared. If that turns into a motion, if we could do this fair share and impact fee, I'm not sure how it's calculated for a sidewalk. If those improvements are asked for, it'd be good. Maybe we need to hear from Public Works on it.
Armando Fernandez is available to speak to this. Armando, could you please raise your hand?
Good afternoon, commissioners. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So we don't have, I'm not aware that MST has a program where development projects can contribute to their overall master plan. So I'm pretty confident that that doesn't exist at the moment. The alternative would be for somebody that is trained and qualified to develop typically the code requires that fair share contributions be calculated, and so the project is responsible typically only for the fair share contribution. So in this case, typically there's a study that identifies what the pedestrian activity is from the project alone relative to the pedestrian activity that is generated by the surrounding land uses. And then you can quantify what the ratio or proportionality is for the project, and then develop a cost estimate for a pedestrian path project, and then you can identify what the fair share calculation is or what the fee would be for the project only. In this case, again, the MST bus or MST does not have a study, and the county doesn't have a study either for quantifying what the fair share calculation would be in this case.
Does the county have any plans for sidewalks in that area?
There is the community plan that is, I don't know when that's going to get implemented, but through the community plan, there is future sidewalks through Boronda Road.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Going once, going twice. Oh, Commissioner Shaw.
I'm just gonna put, so maybe I'm the only one confused by this. I thought that them just building sidewalks that are ADA compliant and upgraded and nice in front of their property was like the extent of what they're obligated to do. So I guess this is news to me that they need to contribute to the whole more. I won't try to, assume what people are going to do and not do in that neighborhood as far as taking the bus. I'll just put that out there. So that's news to me. Second, a little bit off topic, backtracking to the affordable housing criteria, how that's determined. I'm also still a bit confused about that, but I'm comfortable just letting that be. I did want to address some comments that were made, though, about this suddenly becoming not affordable if we incorporate at least one low-income unit. And I understand some of the other projects that we've seen where, yeah, the costs associated with having a low-income unit and how much that family would have to make to qualify for that, then they can't pay their sewer bills, which are higher than other places, and HOA fees and stuff. This, to me, seems like the perfect location to add one of those units where it seems like the barriers to home ownership are often the down payment. This seems like this would be the perfect location for it. I don't know that that's something we could make happen. I just wanted to express that. I think that's a bit of a big assumption to just say that they couldn't afford to live here if they're low income. That's all. Thanks.
Commissioner Deal?
I want to second the excellent point of my colleague to the right, but I also want to go back and say that I don't think we should consider any offsite improvements because we're taking the common sense exemption. We just went to a lot of trouble to take the common sense exemption saying there weren't going to be any of those. And if we subsequently turn around and say now all of a sudden we think there are going to be some, then we need to reconsider that, and I don't want to do it. I don't think it's called for. So I would be willing, if the commission were supportive, of making a motion to approve the amended resolution as we've discussed in the hearing, with the addition of the condition 18 language to incorporate the recognition that the internal circulation will be according to the complete streets language, whatever we felt we could take from our guidance from MST. So, and then this would be all of the changes we've made today in the hearing.
So there's
Not new condition 32.
And condition 32 was the one about the sidewalks. Okay. So we have a motion by Commissioner Deal, and we have a second by Commissioner Shaw. Any other questions, comments, concerns, discussions? Seeing. Commissioner Work
I
has.
just want to be clear, so we're asking them to build this 4/10 of a mile or not?
No, I believe we were not.
The motion does not include that.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns, clarifications? Going once, Commissioner Mendoza.
I just have a quick question. In reference to approving this development here or what have you, is there a time limit for when it has to be completed? In other words, I've heard in the past that we've approved projects and they never get built. You know, it might be 10 years into it. So I just think that moving forward, there should be a time limit. Like, look, if this is the intention, then this is what we're approving. It has to get built. You know, 10 years later, and we still have the 16, 17 lots, and there's nothing there, just a piece of property that's worth a lot more money. And so I'm just thinking that if something's getting approved, there should be a time limit for when it should be built. That's just an opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez?
No, I'm just going to ask, is it, that's more for our county council. Can we set a limit on approved projects? Can we put a time limit, like 10 years or 50, whatever it is? Is that something we could do?
I can't answer that with certainty without research.
Okay. That'd be good too. Maybe you come back and give us an answer later on future projects.
I'd be happy to look into it and report back.
Any other commissioners? Okay, for the good of the order, all those in favor of the motion so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. And let me flip the page here, and then we have any department reports. And it's past 12:30.
Yes, I will keep them quite brief. We followed what was a bit unique today with our department reports that a number of commissioners may not have seen before. We do have an adopted procedure for how we bring forward for the Planning Commission and the public to consider administrative interpretations of our code. This today is a receive-only item. But staff did want to indicate that we did receive comment. We did receive a public comment on it. Staff has reviewed, and based on that, we'll be making some edits to this. To the administrative interpretation. Staff would intend to bring that forward again to the Planning Commission in a similar manner as a receive-only item, which would start an appeal period. However, staff would request if the commission has any concerns or questions about the administrative interpretation, then you have the ability to direct us that when we make those edits, we can also bring it back as an agendized item for input and consideration by the commission.
Any other reports? Commissioner Deal?
Thank you. This is a general statement about the process of administrative interpretations, I guess, more than anything else. The immediate question that pops into my mind is what happens if we don't do this? So the no project alternatives, assuming that this interpretation doesn't go into effect, what does that mean?
So the reason that this was actually a staff-initiated interpretation, because we've seen circumstances for a number of cases where individual projects are coming forward for permits, and that permit process for cases that staff feels appropriately could be appropriately handled without public hearing through more of an administrative process. It's essentially absent of it. It's not a huge volume, but those projects that could qualify for the range in which this interpretation would apply would have to go through a higher level of review.
So really, this changes processing. This is a permit streamlining effort.
Correct. It's an effort to streamline process for a very limited, narrow scope of cases. And it would go in, so as presented today, it would go into effect with a 10-day appeal period should there not be an appeal received. That said, staff does wish to make some clarifying edits to it. And upon return, that would also be true unless the unless the commission wishes to deliberate on it. So absent this administration, this interpretation at all, there are a certain number, but it's a small handful of projects that, and I'm looking at staff who have been more directly processing for maybe an approximate of how many projects we think might fall into this very narrow interpretation for a slightly more streamlined permitting process. Do you have any ideas, Ms. Jensen?
Probably very dependent on, property owner demands throughout the year, but I would say roughly between 15 to 20 projects a year. I do want to clarify that the purpose is not to intend or reduce the amount of public hearings per se, but to streamline an already administrative process to be more effective and streamlined for staff resources and property owner's sake.
To follow up on that, so suppose we end up with a problem with an administrative interpretation. Now, again, not this one in particular, but suppose that there's an administrative interpretation that staff's following that then results in an outcome that is undesirable for some reason. How would we address such a situation should it occur?
So these are administrative interpretations. The commission itself, you are policymakers as the board. And so, so you can direct staff to review it and revise and amend to close any potential loopholes that may be discovered subsequent. So it's within your discretion to do that. Again, these are director level interpretations that are subject also to appeal by the public as well during this appeal period.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.